The dust swirled in lazy spirals outside Clara Whitmore's schoolhouse window, painting the glass with a film of red earth that never quite came clean. She watched it dance in the late afternoon sun, her hands mechanically wiping down the small wooden desks where her students had sat just hours before. 2 years. 2 years since Thomas had been laid in the ground behind the church. And still the townspeople looked at her with that peculiar mixture of pity and suspicion that seemed reserved for young widows. Mercy's Bend wasn't much to speak of, a collection of weathered buildings huddled against the endless stretch of New Mexico territory, where the wind howled like a living thing and the coyotes sang their mournful songs to the moon. The town clung to life through sheer stubbornness, much like Clara herself. She'd come here as a bride 5 years ago, full of dreams about civilizing the frontier through education. Now she remained because she had nowhere else to go. The schoolhouse door creaked, and Clara looked up, expecting to see one of her students returning for a forgotten slate. Instead, she found herself staring at an empty doorway, the wind having pushed it open. She crossed the room to close it, pausing to look down the dusty main street. The saloon's tinny piano music drifted on the air, mixing with the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. Same sounds, same sights, every day blending into the next. That evening, as Clara walked the familiar path to her small wooden house at the edge of town, she noticed the ravens perched on the old telegraph poles, their black forms stark against the burning sky. They watched her pass with intelligent eyes, as if they knew secrets she didn't. The thought made her shiver despite the lingering heat. Her house stood alone, separated from the rest of town by a stretch of scrub brush and a dry creek bed that only ran during the rare thunderstorms. Thomas had built it with his own hands, promising her it would be filled with children's laughter someday. Now it held only silence and shadows. As she approached her gate, Clara noticed her mare, Buttercup, acting strangely in the small corral beside the house. The horse's ears were pricked forward, her attention fixed on something beyond Clara's view. Then she heard it, the steady clip-clop of hooves on the hard-packed road. A lone rider emerged from the heat shimmer, moving with the unhurried pace of someone who'd traveled far. Clara's hand instinctively moved to the collar of her dress, a gesture born of propriety and caution. Strangers were rare in Mercy's Bend, and rarely brought good news. The man rode a dust-covered bay horse that looked as tired as its rider. As he drew closer, Clara could make out more details. Worn leather chaps, a hat pulled low against the sun, and something else that made her breath catch. A scar, pale against sun-darkened skin, running from his jaw down into the collar of his shirt. He reined in his horse near her gate but didn't dismount. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. His eyes were the color of winter sky, gray and distant, holding something Clara recognized but couldn't name. Pain, perhaps, or just the weight of too many miles. "Ma'am," he said finally, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was rough, as if he hadn't used it in days. "Sir," Clara responded, maintaining her position by the gate. "If you're looking for the hotel, it's back on Main Street. Mrs. Hutchins runs a clean establishment." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not looking for a hotel? Heard tell the Carson spread might be hiring." "The horse ranch? That's 5 miles north. You'll want to follow the creek bed until you see the split rock, then bear west." Clara found herself studying his hands where they rested on the saddle horn, scarred and capable, but gentle with the reins. "Obliged," he said, but didn't move to leave. His horse shifted, and Clara saw the brand on its flank, JC, burned deep into the hide. "You wouldn't happen to know if they're particular about a man's past?" The question hung between them like dust motes in sunlight. Clara knew what he was really asking. The Carsons, like most folk in these parts, preferred their hired hands without too many questions attached. "Mr. Carson judges a man by his work," she said carefully, "though he's been known to check with Sheriff Morrison before taking anyone on." The stranger nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He gathered his reins, preparing to move on, when a sharp crack split the air. Clara's wagon, parked beside the house, had chosen that moment to surrender to age and weather. The front axle snapped clean through, sending the wagon bed tilting dramatically toward the ground. Clara let out a sound of frustration. That wagon was her only means of getting supplies from town, and the nearest wheelwright was in Fort Summer, 2 days' ride away. Without a word, the stranger dismounted. He moved with economy, every gesture purposeful, up close. Clara could see the fine lines around his eyes, the kind that came from squinting into too many suns. He examined the broken axle with the same careful attention she'd seen him give his horse. "Can't fix it proper without a new axle," he said, "but I could shore it up temporary like, get you by until you can get it to a wheelwright. I couldn't impose, no imposition." He was already moving to his saddlebags, pulling out tools that spoke of a man used to making do. "Won't take but a few minutes." Clara watched him work, noting the efficient way he moved, the careful handling of her property. He didn't try to make conversation, didn't try to charm or impress. He simply worked as if helping a stranger was the most natural thing in the world. When he finished, the wagon sat level again, the brake reinforced with leather strips and a piece of wood he'd shaped with his knife. It wouldn't last forever, but it would hold. "I'm grateful," Clara said, meaning it. "Can I offer you something? Water for you and your horse? I've got cold biscuits from this morning." "Water for the horse would be kindly appreciated," he said, already leading the bay toward her trough. While the animal drank, he stood back, his gaze taking in her small property, the carefully tended garden, the mended fence, the signs of a woman making do on her own. "You're the schoolteacher," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am Clara Whitmore, Jessie Cade." He didn't offer his hand, and she was grateful. The rules of propriety were thin out here, but they were all that stood between civilization and chaos. "You planning to stay in the area long, Mr. Cade?" He shrugged. "Depends on the work. Man's gotta eat." "Well, I hope Mr. Carson has need of you. Good help's hard to find." She meant it as a simple courtesy, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition of kindness too rarely offered. He mounted up again, settling into the saddle with the ease of someone more comfortable there than on foot. "I'll be heading on. Thank you for the directions, Mrs. Whitmore, and the water. Thank you for your help with the wagon." He touched his hat brim again and turned his horse north. Clara watched him go, noting the straight set of his shoulders, the way he moved with his horse as if they were one creature. It wasn't until he disappeared into the heat shimmer that she realized she'd been holding her breath. That night, as Clara prepared her simple supper of beans and cornbread, she found herself thinking about the stranger's eyes, gray like winter sky. She'd thought, but that wasn't quite right. They were more like storm clouds, holding rain that wouldn't fall. The next morning brought the usual routine, rising before dawn, tending to Buttercup, preparing lessons for the day. But as Clara walked to the schoolhouse, she caught herself glancing north, toward the Carson spread. It was foolishness, she told herself. A drifter helping with a broken wagon meant nothing. Men like Jessie Cade blew through towns like Mercy's Bend all the time, leaving nothing behind but dust. Still, throughout the day, as she guided her students through their letters and sums, the memory of those careful hands and storm cloud eyes kept intruding. During the noon break, while the children played outside, she overheard Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Douglas talking by the well. "Carson hired that new fellow," Mrs. Patterson was saying. "The one with the scar." "Did he now?" Mrs. Douglas's voice carried that particular tone reserved for gossip. "I heard from my husband that the man's got papers from the court in Santa Fe. An official pardon." "Pardon for what?" "Murder, what else? Though they say it wasn't proven. Lack of evidence or some such." Clara's hands stilled on the book she was holding. She shouldn't listen. Knew it was wrong to give credence to gossip, but she couldn't help remembering the weight in Jessie Cade's eyes, the careful way he'd moved, as if expecting trouble. "Well, I don't like it. Mrs., Patterson declared. What kind of man needs a pardon if he didn't do nothing wrong? The kind that's been accused unfairly, perhaps, Clara said, stepping out of the schoolhouse. Both women turned, having the grace to look embarrassed. I believe Mr. Carson is a fine judge of character. If he's hired Mr. Cade, that should be endorsement enough. The women exchanged glances, then Mrs. Douglas smiled thinly. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore. You're quite right. We were just concerned. What with him being so close to town and all, a woman living alone has to be careful. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. I've been managing quite well these 2 years, thank you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to call the children back to lessons. But the seed was planted. That evening, as she walked home, Clara found herself checking over her shoulder, listening for hoofbeats that never came. It was ridiculous, she told herself. One brief encounter didn't make Jessie Cade her concern. The days settled back into routine. Clara taught, tended her house, visited Thomas's grave on Sundays after church. But sometimes, in the early morning when she fed Buttercup, she'd see riders from the Carson spread moving cattle in the distance. And she'd wonder if one of them sat his horse with that particular straight-backed grace. It was nearly a week later when she saw him again. She was struggling with a load of supplies from the general store, trying to balance too many packages while managing her skirts in the wind. The wagon, still held together by Jessie's temporary repair, waited in front of the store. Let me help you with that, ma'am. She turned to find Jessie standing there, hat in hand, in the daylight of Main Street. She could see him more clearly. The scar was less prominent than she'd thought, and his face, while weathered, had a quality of stillness to it that she found oddly comforting. Mr. Cade, I didn't hear you approach. Sorry if I startled you. He was already reaching for the heavier packages, his movements careful not to crowd her. Saw you were loaded down. Thank you. She let him take the flour sack and the bolt of cloth she'd purchased for new curtains. As they walked to her wagon, she was aware of eyes watching from shop windows. How are you finding the work at Carson's? It's good work, honest. He loaded her packages with the same care he'd shown when fixing her wagon. Mr. Carson's a fair man. He is. His wife was one of the first to welcome me when I arrived in Mercy's Bend. You're not from here, then? Ohio, originally. My husband, my late husband, brought me west 5 years ago. She didn't know why she felt compelled to clarify Thomas's status. Perhaps it was the way Jessie's eyes flickered with something that might have been understanding. I'm sorry for your loss, he said simply. Thank you. She hesitated, then asked, Where are you from? Mr. Cade? Here and there. Texas. Most recently. Before that. He shrugged. Before that doesn't much matter. They stood by her wagon, an awkward silence growing between them. Clara knew she should leave, knew people were watching, but something held her there. Your wagon repair is holding up well, she said finally. It won't last forever. I could build you a new axle proper, if you like. Got access to tools at Carson's, and I'm handy with wood. I couldn't ask. You're not asking. I'm offering. His gray eyes met hers directly. Wouldn't take but a day's work. I could do it Sunday, if that suits. Sunday, when most folk would be at church or resting, when he could work without the whole town watching and whispering. That's very kind of you, Mr. Cade. I'd insist on paying you. Of course. We'll work something out. He stepped back, settling his hat on his head. I'll be by after morning chores Sunday, if that's acceptable. Yeah, thank you. He touched his brim and turned to go, but Clara found herself calling after him. Mr. Cade. He paused, looking back. The general store has good prices on work gloves. Mrs. Miller keeps them behind the counter. His hands, she'd noticed, bore fresh cuts and scrapes from ranch work. A smile, the first real one she'd seen from him, crossed his face, transforming it briefly. Obliged for the information, Mrs. Whitmore. As Clara drove home, the whispers had already started behind her. She could imagine the conversations, the widow Whitmore and the stranger with the pardon. What could she be thinking? But for the first time in 2 years, Clara found she didn't much care what they said. That Sunday, true to his word, Jesse appeared at her gate just as the church bells were finishing their call to worship. He'd brought wood and tools, and he worked through the heat of the day, fashioning a new axle with skilled hands. Clara kept herself busy with chores, but found excuses to pass by the window where she could watch him work. When the sun reached its peak, she brought him water and a plate of food. He accepted both gratefully, sitting in the shade of her cottonwood tree to eat. "You're not a church-going man, Mr. Cade?" she asked, settling on the porch steps at a proper distance. "Haven't found much welcome in churches lately," he said. "Figure the Lord and I can have our conversations without the middleman. My husband used to say something similar. He went because I asked him to, but I always suspected his heart wasn't in it. Wise man. He was." Clara smoothed her skirts. "Though perhaps not wise enough. He died trying to break a horse everyone told him couldn't be broken." Jesse's hand stilled on his plate. "I'm sorry. That's a hard way to lose someone." "Yes." She stood abruptly, not wanting to pursue that line of conversation. "I'll let you get back to work." As the afternoon wore on, Clara found herself listening to the steady rhythm of his work, the rasp of the saw, the thud of the hammer. It was a comforting sound, reminding her of the early days with Thomas when they were building their life together. When Jesse finally finished, the sun was painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The wagon stood solid on its new axle, better than it had been in years. "I can't thank you enough," Clara said, surveying his work. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing." At her protest, he held up a hand. "You gave me directions when I was a stranger, water for my horse, and spoke kindly when others might not have. Consider us square. That's hardly equal. It is to me." His voice carried a finality that stopped further argument. He gathered his tools, preparing to leave. "Wait," Clara said, making a decision she didn't fully understand. Would you take supper with me? It's the least I can do, and it's a long ride back to Carson's." He hesitated, glancing toward town where lights were beginning to appear in windows. She knew what he was thinking, the same thing she should be thinking. A widow, alone with a man of questionable reputation. The talk would be vicious. "That's kind of you, ma'am, but I wouldn't want to cause you trouble. I'm offering Mr. Cade. The choice is yours." For a moment, their eyes held. Then he nodded slowly. "I'd be honored." And so, as shadows lengthened across the desert and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Clara Whitmore opened her door to Jesse Cade, not knowing she was also opening her carefully ordered life to possibilities she'd thought buried with her husband. In the distance, a coyote howled, and the wind whispered secrets through the sage. But inside Clara's small house, for the first time in 2 years, there was the soft murmur of conversation and the warmth of shared company. The meal would be simple, the talk careful and constrained by propriety, but it was a beginning. And in the harsh land of Mercy's Bend, beginnings were precious things indeed. The lamp cast a warm circle of light on Clara's kitchen table, where 2 plates sat with the remains of a simple meal, beans, cornbread, and preserved peaches from last summer's harvest. Jesse Cade sat across from her, his presence filling the small room in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size. They'd eaten mostly in silence, the clink of forks against plates the primary conversation. "More coffee?" Clara asked, already rising with the pot. "Thank you." He watched her pour, his gray eyes following her movements with that same careful attention he gave everything. "This is fine coffee, ma'am. My one indulgence, I order it special from Fort Summer." She settled back into her chair, wrapping her hands around her own cup. "My husband used to tease me about it, said I'd rather go without flour than coffee beans. Sounds like a man who understood priorities." A smile tugged at her lips. "He did at that." She paused, then asked, "Do you have family, Mr. Cade?" Something shuddered in his expression. "Had a sister once. She's gone now. I'm sorry. Long time ago. He shifted in his chair, and she sensed the subject was closed. You teach all ages at the school? Clara accepted the change of topic gracefully. 6 through 16, though I rarely keep them past 14. Most are needed on their families' farms by then. Currently, I have 12 students, though attendance varies with the seasons. Must be challenging, teaching so many different levels. It is, but I love it. There's something wonderful about watching a child's face when they first understand something, when the letters suddenly become words, or the numbers start making sense. She felt herself warming to the subject. Just last week, young Timothy Morrison, the sheriff's boy, finally grasped long division. You'd have thought he'd struck gold. Jessie's face softened. You care about them. Of course I do. They're good children. All of them. Even the troublesome ones just need someone to believe in them. She hesitated, then added, People aren't always what they seem on the surface. His eyes met hers, understanding passing between them. No, ma'am, they're not. The clock on the mantel chimed 8, and Jessie stirred. I should be going. Dawn comes early at Carson's. Clara walked him to the door, aware of how small her house suddenly felt with him in it. On the porch, he paused, hat in hand. Thank you for supper, Mrs. Whitmore. It's been a long time since I sat at a proper table. You're welcome any time, Mr. Cade. The words were out before she could consider their propriety. He studied her face in the lamplight spilling from the doorway. That's kind of you to say, but we both know it wouldn't be wise. This town will talk regardless. They've been talking about me for 2 years. That's different. You're a respectable widow. He stopped, jaw tightening. You're what? A man who helped a stranger? Who worked all day for no pay except a simple meal? Clara felt a flash of anger, though not at him. Whatever you were before, Mr. Cade, you've shown me nothing but kindness and respect. And I aim to keep it that way, which means not giving folks more cause to wag their tongues about you. He settled his hat on his head. Good evening, ma'am. Clara watched him ride away. Frustration and something else, something she didn't want to name, churning in her chest. She'd been so careful these 2 years, keeping everyone at arm's length, wrapping herself in propriety like armor. Now, this quiet man with his scarred hands and storm-cloud eyes had slipped past her defenses without even trying. The next morning brought a taste of what Jessie had predicted. Clara had barely opened the schoolhouse when Mrs. Patterson appeared, her son Billy in tow. Good morning, Clara, she said, her tone deceptively sweet. Billy tells me the most interesting thing. He says he saw that Cade fellow leaving your house last evening, after dark. Clara kept her expression neutral as she arranged books on her desk. Mr. Cade repaired my wagon yesterday. I offered him supper as thanks for his work. How neighborly of you. Mrs. Patterson's smile could have curdled milk. Of course, I'm sure you were just being Christian. But, my dear, you must be more careful. A woman in your position can't afford even the appearance of impropriety. My position? Clara straightened, meeting the other woman's eyes directly. And what position is that, exactly? Why, a widow, of course. Living alone, teaching our children. You have a reputation to maintain. I see. And feeding a man who worked all day in the sun threatens that reputation? Mrs. Patterson's face flushed. When that man is a killer, yes. The word hung in the air between them. Several other children had arrived and were watching with wide eyes. Clara took a breath, fighting for calm. Mr. Cade has been pardoned by the territorial court. That means, in the eyes of the law, he's innocent of any wrongdoing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to begin lessons. Mrs. Patterson left in a huff, but the damage was done. Throughout the day, Clara noticed the children whispering, shooting glances at her when they thought she wasn't looking. Young Sarah Jenkins raised her hand during arithmetic. Miss Clara, my mama says we're not supposed to talk to the man with the scar. Is he really dangerous? Clara set down her chalk carefully. Children, what have I taught you about judging others? To judge not, lest ye be judged. Several voices chorused. That's right, Mr. Cade works for Mr. Carson, who is a good judge of character. That should be enough for all of us. She softened her tone. Now, back to our sums. But the whispers continued. By the end of the week, Clara noticed 2 families had kept their children home. She tried not to let it bother her, but the empty desks accused her every morning. It was young Timothy Morrison who brought unexpected perspective. The sheriff's son lingered after school on Friday, helping her clean the blackboard. Miss Clara, he said hesitantly, my PA says that Cade fellow got a raw deal. Says the man he killed had it coming. Only the law couldn't prove it proper. Clara's hand stilled on the eraser. Your father told you this? Timothy nodded. Pa says sometimes the law and justice ain't the same thing, says Mr. Cade paid his price even though he shouldn't have had to. Your father sounds like a wise man. Timothy? Yes, ma'am. He also said, the boy flushed. He said you're a grown woman who can make her own choices, and folks should mind their own business. Despite everything, Clara smiled. Thank him for me. Will you? Yes, ma'am. That evening, Clara sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of copper and gold. She'd seen Jesse only once since their dinner, a distant figure moving cattle with the other Carson hands. He'd touched his hat when he saw her but hadn't approached. She understood why. Even as it frustrated her, a rider appeared on the horizon, and for a moment her heart lifted. But it was only Jake Sanders from the telegraph office, bringing news that her monthly book shipment had arrived in Fort Summer. Another reminder of her isolation, of the careful life she'd built around books and lessons and other people's children. Saturday brought the weekly trip to town for supplies. Clara steeled herself for more whispers, more pointed looks. What she didn't expect was support from an unlikely quarter. She was selecting fabric when Dolores Vasquez, who ran the boarding house, approached her. The older woman had always been cordial but distant, their interactions limited to polite nods. Mrs. Whitmore. Dolores said quietly, I wanted to say something. That man, Cade, he helped my boy Miguel fix our roof last week. Wouldn't take payment, just said neighbors help neighbors. Whatever he was before, he's decent now. You did right, feeding him. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Mrs. Vasquez. People talk because they have nothing better to do. You hold your head high. The unexpected kindness sustained Clara through the weekend. Sunday morning, she sat in her usual pew, back straight, ignoring the whispers. Reverend Thompson preached about casting stones, and she wondered if it was coincidence or if Sheriff Morrison had had a word with him. After church, she was surprised to find Jesse waiting by her wagon. He stood apart from the churchgoers, his posture suggesting he'd bolt at the slightest provocation. Mr. Cade, she said, aware of the sudden hush around them. Ma'am, I wondered if you might need anything from Fort Summer. I'm riding that way tomorrow for Mr. Carson. That's kind of you. I have books waiting at the freight office. If it's not too much trouble. No trouble. He glanced at the watching crowd, then back at her. I'm sorry for any difficulty I've caused you. You've caused me no difficulty, Clara said firmly, pitching her voice to Carrie. The difficulties come from small minds with nothing better to occupy them. A muffled gasp came from somewhere behind her, but Clara didn't turn. Jesse's eyes held something that might have been admiration. I'll bring your books Tuesday evening, if that suits. That would be fine. Thank you, Mr. Cade. He touched his hat and left, and Clara climbed into her wagon with as much dignity as she could muster. Let them talk, she thought. She'd done nothing wrong. Tuesday evening found her pacing her small house, alternating between anticipation and anxiety. When she finally heard hoofbeats, she had to force herself not to rush to the door. Jesse stood on her porch with a wooden crate, his expression carefully neutral. Your books, ma'am. Please, bring them in. She held the door open, noting how he hesitated before crossing the threshold. Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot. I shouldn't stay. Perhaps not, but I'd like you to. She met his eyes. Unless you'd rather not. He set the crate down slowly. You know what you're doing, inviting trouble like this? I'm inviting a friend for coffee. Mr. Cade. If that's trouble, then I've been living too carefully. Friend. He tested the word as if it were foreign. Been a long time since anyone called me that. Then perhaps it's time someone did. They sat at her kitchen table again, the coffee between them like a bridge. This time, the silence was more comfortable, less charged with uncertainty. Tell me about your sister, Clara said softly. Jesse's hands tightened on his cup. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, Emily. Her name was Emily, 7 years younger than me, sweet as spring water and twice as pure. His voice roughened. She died because I wasn't there to protect her. Man named Garrett, he owned the land we were sharecropping, decided he had rights to more than just the crops. Clara reached out instinctively, her fingers barely brushing his hand before she caught herself. Jesse? I found her in the barn, barely alive, barely. He stopped, jaw working. She lived 3 days, long enough to tell me what happened, long enough to beg me not to do anything stupid. A bitter laugh. I buried her on a Tuesday, shot Garrett on Wednesday. They arrested me Thursday. But surely, given the circumstances, Garrett was rich, connected. I was nobody. They said I couldn't prove what he'd done to Emily. Said she was known to be wild. His eyes were flint hard now. Wild. Because she laughed loud and rode horses astride and didn't bow her head enough for their liking. Clara's throat was tight. The pardon came 2 years later when Garrett's own wife finally told the truth, said she knew what he was, had known for years. Too late for Emily. Too late for the 2 years I spent in prison. He looked at her directly. So now you know what kind of man you're sharing coffee with? I know exactly what kind of man I'm sharing coffee with, Clara said steadily. A man who loved his sister, who sought justice when the law failed, who's been paying for it ever since. Most folks don't see it that way. I'm not most folks. She poured more coffee, her hands steady despite the emotion churning inside her. My husband died breaking a horse because he was drunk, something I've never told anyone. The whole town thinks he was brave, trying to tame an untamable beast. The truth is, he was drunk more often than sober those last months, and mean with it. Jessie studied her face. Did he hurt you? Not physically. He was careful about that. But there are other kinds of hurt. She traced the wood grain of the table. I've been the grieving widow for 2 years, letting people believe a lie because the truth was too shameful. So perhaps I understand something about the difference between who people think we are and who we really are. You're nothing like me, Jessie said quietly. You're good, kind. You teach children and grow gardens and make homes out of empty houses. And you fix wagons for strangers and help neighbors with their roofs and work hard for an honest wage. Which of us sounds more admirable? Mr. Cade? He shook his head but didn't argue further. Outside, thunder rumbled distantly, promising one of the rare desert storms. I should go, he said, before the rain starts. This time, Clara didn't argue. She walked him to the door, where he paused, looking out at the gathering clouds. Thank you, he said simply, for the coffee. For listening. Thank you for trusting me with the truth. He touched his hat and was gone, spurring his horse to beat the storm. Clara stood in her doorway, watching lightning flash over the distant mountains. The air smelled of coming rain and change. That night, as the storm broke over Mercy's Bend, Clara lay awake listening to the rain drum against her roof. For 2 years, she'd been the perfect widow, frozen in acceptable grief. Now, with a few words over coffee, Jesse Cade had cracked that facade like his temporary repair on her wagon, functional but not meant to last. The question was, what would she build in its place? The weeks that followed the storm brought a different kind of tempest to Clara's life. The whispers had grown to open speculation, and she found herself increasingly isolated. 3 more families had withdrawn their children from school, citing vague concerns about influences. Clara taught her remaining 7 students with determined cheer, but the empty desks were a daily reminder of the price of her association with Jesse Cade. She saw him only from a distance now, a lone figure against the horizon, moving cattle or mending fences. He'd taken to working the farthest reaches of the Carson spread, and Clara understood why. He was trying to protect her from further gossip by staying away. The loneliness was a physical thing, settling into her bones like the morning cold. She'd been lonely before. Of course, in the years with Thomas when he'd retreat into the bottle and become a stranger in their bed. But this was different. This was the absence of something that had barely begun to exist, a possibility cut off before it could bloom. One evening, as she graded compositions by lamplight, a soft knock came at her door. Her heart leaped, but it was only Miguel Vasquez, Dolores' son, holding a covered dish. "Mama sends her regards," the boy said shyly. "And tamales." "How kind of her. Please thank your mother for me." Miguel shifted on his feet. "Mama also said to tell you that Mr. Cade asked after you when he helped us with the chicken coop yesterday. Wanted to know if you were well." Clara's throat tightened. "You can tell Mr. Cade that I'm quite well. Thank you." The boy nodded and scampered off, leaving Clara with a still warm dish and an ache in her chest. Jesse was checking on her through intermediaries, maintaining distance while still showing concern. It was both touching and frustrating. The next morning brought an unexpected crisis. She arrived at the schoolhouse to find the front window broken. Glass scattered across the floor. Nothing was stolen. There was nothing to steal, but the message was clear. Someone wanted her to know she was unwelcome. Sheriff Morrison arrived within the hour, his weathered face grim as he surveyed the damage. Any idea who might have done this? Mrs. Whitmore. Someone with strong opinions about my choice of dinner guests, I imagine. Morrison sighed. "Clara, I've got to ask, is Cade bothering you in any way? Making unwanted advances?" "No." The vehemence of her response surprised them both. "No, Sheriff, Mr. Cade has been nothing but respectful. He's stayed away precisely to avoid causing me trouble. Yet trouble's found you anyway. That's not his fault. That's the fault of small-minded people who—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. Morrison studied her with knowing eyes. "You're developing feelings for him." It wasn't a question. Clara turned away, beginning to sweep up the glass. "My feelings are my own business. Not when windows get broken. They're not," his voice gentled. "Clara, I knew Jesse Cade before, back in Texas, before everything went bad. He was a good man then, and I believe he's a good man now. But that doesn't change what others think, and it doesn't change the danger that puts you in. So I should bow to their prejudice. Let them dictate who I can and cannot associate with. I'm saying you should be careful, and maybe think about whether whatever this is, or might become, is worth losing your position here." Clara's hands stilled on the broom. "You think they dismiss me? I think the school board's already discussing it. Mrs. Patterson has been very vocal." The unfairness of it burned in Clara's throat. 2 years of exemplary service, of loving those children and giving them the best education she could, and it could all be swept away because she'd shown kindness to a man the town had decided to hate. She taught that day with glass crunching under her feet and wind whistling through the boarded window. The children were subdued, aware that something had shifted in their small world. At noon, she dismissed them early, unable to maintain her cheerful facade any longer. Walking home, Clara made a decision. If the town wanted to judge her for her associations, she'd give them something real to judge. She found Jesse at the Carson spread, working alone in the far corral, breaking a young horse to saddle. He moved with patient grace, speaking low to the animal, his whole being focused on the task. Clara waited by the fence, watching him work, until he finally noticed her. The surprise on his face quickly shifted to concern. "Clara, what's wrong? What are you doing here?" It was the first time he'd used her given name, and hearing it in his rough voice made her resolve strengthen. "Someone broke the schoolhouse window last night. Sheriff Morrison thinks I might lose my position." Jesse's face darkened. He left the horse and came to the fence, though he didn't cross it. "I'll leave. Tonight. This is my fault. Don't you dare." The words came out sharper than intended. "Don't you dare let them drive you away. You've done nothing wrong. I've ruined your life here. No, they're ruining it with their gossip and their judgment and their small, mean hearts." She gripped the fence rail. "I came to tell you that I don't care anymore about the whispers or the job or any of it. Clara, I care about you." The words hung between them like the dust motes in the afternoon sun. "I know we barely know each other. I know it's too soon and too complicated and too everything. But I care about you, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise." Jesse's knuckles were white on the fence rail. "You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever. I feel alive when I talk to you. I'm saying that your kindness and your sadness and your strength have wakened something in me I thought was dead." Her voice dropped. "I'm saying that if I'm going to be condemned anyway, I'd rather be condemned for something real. Clara, please!" His voice was raw. "I've got nothing to offer you. No home, no prospects, nothing but an ugly past and an uncertain future. I have a home. I have prospects of my own. What I don't have is someone who sees me, really sees me, the way you do." He came around the fence then, stopping just out of reach. Up close, she could see the war in his eyes. Want battling with honor, hope fighting with fear. You deserve better than a broken-down gunman with blood on his hands. And you deserve better than a lifetime of loneliness as penance for protecting your sister. She took a step closer. "We both deserve a chance at something good. Jesse, something true." For a long moment, they stood there in the dusty corral, the distance between them humming with possibility. Then Jesse reached out slowly, his work-rough fingers barely touching her cheek. "You're sure?" he asked. "Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. The whole town will turn against you." "Let them—" Clara leaned into his touch. "I've been living for their approval for 2 years. I want to try living for myself." Jesse's thumb traced her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. Then, as if making a decision that would change everything, he stepped closer and kissed her. It was nothing like the dutiful kisses of her marriage. This was fire and promise and a sweetness that made her ache. When they parted, Clara was trembling, her hands fisted in his shirt. "I've wanted to do that since you offered me coffee that first night," Jesse admitted. "I've wanted you to since you fixed my wagon with such careful hands." He laughed, a rusty sound. "We're both fools. Then. Perhaps, but honest fools." The sound of approaching horses made them spring apart. "Mister." Carson rode up with 2 of his hands, his expression unreadable as he took in Clara's presence. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, touching his hat. "Everything all right?" "Yes, Mr. Carson. I was just leaving." She looked at Jesse. "Will I see you later?" Jesse glanced at his employer, then back at her. "If Mr. Carson doesn't mind me leaving a bit early, I could stop by after supper." Carson studied them both, then nodded slowly. "Man's got a right to his evenings. Just have those horses ready for the drive tomorrow." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." As Clara walked back to her buggy, she heard Carson say quietly to Jesse, "You sure you know what you're doing, son?" "No, sir," Jesse replied, "but I know I've got to try." That evening, as promised, Jesse came to her door. This time, Clara didn't hesitate to invite him in. They sat on her small sofa, closer than propriety allowed, and talked until the moon was high. He told her about his childhood in Texas, about his parents who died of fever when he was 15, leaving him to raise Emily alone. She told him about growing up in Ohio, about her dreams of adventure that had led her west, only to find a different kind of life than she'd imagined. "I used to write," she confessed. "Stories, poems. Thomas made me stop, said it was frivolous, that a wife should focus on practical things." "Do you still remember any of them?" "Your poems?" Clara blushed. "They weren't very good. I'd still like to hear one, if you're willing." She recited a short verse about the desert in spring, when the rare rains brought impossible blooms. Jesse listened with that complete attention he gave everything, and when she finished, he said simply, "That's beautiful. You should write again." "Maybe I will." As the evening grew late, Jesse rose to leave. At the door, he hesitated. "Clara, I need you to know. I'll understand if you change your mind. Tomorrow, in the clear light of day, when you're facing those empty desks and hostile faces, I'll understand if this is too much." She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him softly. "I won't change my mind, but thank you for giving me the choice." After he left, Clara stood in her doorway, looking out at the star-filled sky. Tomorrow would bring consequences. She had no illusions about that. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like herself. Not the grieving widow, not the proper school teacher, but Clara, a woman who wrote poetry and drank too much coffee, and had fallen for a man with storm-cloud eyes and gentle hands. The wind carried the scent of sage and the distant howl of coyotes. Somewhere out there, Jesse was riding back to the Carson spread, and Clara imagined she could feel the invisible thread that now connected them, fragile as spider's silk, but strong enough to change everything. She closed the door and prepared for bed, knowing that morning would bring a reckoning. But she found she wasn't afraid. She'd lived in fear too long, fear of judgment, fear of impropriety, fear of feeling. Now, with Jesse's kiss still warm on her lips and the promise of something real beckoning, Clara was ready to be brave. Let the town talk. Let them condemn and whisper and judge. She'd found something worth fighting for, and she wouldn't let it go without a battle. In the harsh land of Mercy's Bend, where survival meant compromise and conformity, Clara Whitmore was about to break all the rules, and for the first time in her life, she could hardly wait. The morning after Clara's declaration brought swift retribution. She arrived at the schoolhouse to find Reverend Thompson waiting with 3 members of the school board, Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Douglas, and Judge Carter. Their faces wore the stern expressions of those about to deliver divine judgment. "Mrs. Whitmore," the Reverend began, his voice heavy with manufactured sorrow, "we need to discuss your recent associations." Clara set down her books with deliberate calm. "I assume you mean my friendship with Mr. Cade." "Friendship." Mrs. Patterson's voice dripped disdain. "Is that what you call it? The whole town saw you at the Carson Ranch yesterday. Saw you, embracing—" Heat rose in Clara's cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't deny it." Judge Carter cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitmore, you must understand our position. Parents have expressed concerns about the moral influence you might have on their children." "The moral influence?" Clara felt anger kindle in her chest. "I've taught their children for 2 years without a single complaint. I've shown them nothing but dedication and care." "That was before you took up with a killer." "Mr. Douglas said bluntly. "Mr. Cade was pardoned. In the eyes of the law, your law. Judge Carter, he's innocent. Legal technicalities don't erase what he did." Mrs. Patterson interjected. "The man shot someone in cold blood. He shot a man who violated and murdered his sister." The words came out sharper than Clara intended. Or does that not matter because she was poor? Because she was nobody important? Shocked silence greeted this outburst. Reverend Thompson recovered first. "Mrs. Whitmore, your emotional state suggests you've become too involved in this situation to think clearly. Perhaps some time away would help you regain perspective. Are you dismissing me? We're suggesting a leave of absence," Judge Carter said carefully, "until this situation resolves itself. Until I stop seeing Jesse Cade. You mean, if you choose to see it that way." Clara looked at each of them in turn, these pillars of the community who had smiled at her on Sundays and praised her work when it suited them. "And if I refuse?" "Then we'll have no choice but to find a new teacher," Mrs. Patterson said with barely concealed satisfaction. "One whose behavior aligns with our community values." "I see." Clara began gathering her personal items from the desk. "Then I suppose you'd better start looking." Clara, please. Reverend Thompson tried again. Think about what you're throwing away. Your position, your reputation, your place in this community. My place? Clara laughed bitterly. My place has been that of the tragic widow, the woman to be pitied but kept at arm's length. Well, I'm tired of that place. Reverend, I'm tired of being what you all think I should be instead of who I am. She walked to the door, then turned back. The children deserve better than what you're about to do to them. Remember that when you explain why their teacher is gone. Clara left the schoolhouse with her head high, but her hands shook as she climbed into her buggy. It was done. 2 years of building a life in Mercy's Bend, destroyed in a single morning. The weight of it threatened to crush her, but she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She was halfway home when she saw the riders approaching, a group of men led by Carl Patterson, the banker's son. Their faces were hard, purposeful, and Clara's heart began to race. Mrs. Whitmore, Carl said, reining in beside her buggy. Heading home to wait for your killer, Beau? Let me pass. Carl. Maybe we'll pay him a visit first. Explain how things are in Mercy's Bend. Make sure he understands he's not welcome. Fear, sharp and cold, cut through Clara's anger. You leave him alone. He's done nothing wrong. Nothing wrong, one of the other men spat tobacco juice. He's turned a decent woman into a... Careful, Clara said quietly. Choose your next words very carefully. Something in her voice made him pause. Carl leaned forward in his saddle. You really have fallen for him, haven't you? Thomas must be rolling in his grave. Thomas is beyond caring, and even if he weren't, his opinion stopped mattering the first time he raised his hand to me. The admission hung in the air like gun smoke. Carl's eyes widened. You're lying. Am I? Ask Doctor Hartley about the bruises he treated. Ask Mrs. Mills about the black eye I explained away as a fall. Clara's voice was steady now, filled with a strange calm. Thomas Whitmore was a drunk and a brute, and the only good thing he ever did was die before he could do worse. You're hysterical, Carl said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. That Cade fellow has filled your head with lies. Jesse Cade has shown me more genuine kindness in a few weeks than Thomas showed me in 3 years of marriage. Now get out of my way before I run you down. She snapped the reins, and her horse lurched forward. The men scattered, cursing, but let her pass. Clara didn't look back, though she could feel their eyes following her. At home, she paced her small house like a caged animal, waiting. Jesse would hear what happened. He would come. She knew it as surely as she knew the sun would set. He arrived just after noon, his horse lathered with sweat from hard riding. Clara met him at the door, and he pulled her into his arms without a word. I'm sorry, he said against her hair. This is my fault. I should have stayed away. Don't... She pulled back to look at him. Don't you dare apologize for being the one good thing in my life. Clara, you lost your position, your livelihood. I have savings. I'll manage. That's not the point. His hands cupped her face. I've ruined you. No. She covered his hands with hers. You've saved me from a life of pretense, of slowly dying inside while maintaining a perfect facade. I'd rather be ruined with you than respectable alone. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, and Clara tasted his fear and guilt and love all mingled together. When they parted, she saw moisture in his eyes. I won't let them hurt you, he said. Whatever happens, I won't let them hurt you. Jesse. But she stopped, seeing something in his expression that chilled her. What are you thinking? Maybe it's time I moved on. If I leave, things might settle down for you. Don't you dare. She gripped his shirt. Don't you dare run now. We're in this together. Or not at all. Clara, no, listen to me. She pressed her hands against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. All my life, I've let other people make my choices. My parents chose Thomas for me. Thomas chose how I should live, what I should want. This town chose who I should be after he died. For once, just once, I'm choosing for myself, and I choose you. Jesse's arms tightened around her. You humble me. Good. You could use some humbling. She managed a weak smile. Now, what do we do? First, we get you somewhere safe. Carson's offered to let you stay at the ranch if needed. His wife insisted. That's kind, but I won't be driven from my home. Clara, those men, Carl Patterson's been drinking and talking, working up courage for something stupid, as if to punctuate his words. The sound of approaching horses reached them. Many horses. Clara and Jesse moved to the window, and Clara's heart sank. At least a dozen men were riding toward her house, Carl Patterson at their head. Get your gun, Jesse said quietly. I don't have one. He drew his Colt and checked the chambers. Then stay behind me. Jesse, no, violence won't solve this. It might be the only thing that stops it. He looked at her. I won't let them hurt you, Clara, not while I'm breathing. The riders stopped just outside her fence. Carl's voice carried clearly. Cade, we know you're in there. Come out and face justice like a man. Jesse started for the door, but Clara caught his arm. Let me try first, please. He hesitated, then nodded. Clara stepped onto her porch. Jesse, a shadow behind her in the doorway. Gentlemen, she said, surprised by how calm her voice sounded. To what do I owe this visit? We're here for him, Carl said, pointing at Jesse. He's leaving town, tonight, one way or another. Mr. Cade is employed by Mr. Carson. If Carson wants him gone, that's Carson's business, not yours. It became our business when he started corrupting decent women. Clara laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. Decent? Is that what I was? A decent widow who knew her place and never caused trouble? Well, perhaps I'm tired of being decent. You hear that, boys? Carl addressed his companions. She admits he's corrupted her. The only corruption here is in your minds. Clara shot back. Grown men riding in a mob, making threats. Your fathers would be ashamed. Our fathers would have run him out on a rail already. Someone called out. Jesse stepped out onto the porch. If you've got business with me, then let's settle it. But leave Mrs. Whitmore out of it. Too late for that. Carl sneered. She made her choice. Yes, I did. Clara moved to stand beside Jesse. And I'd make it again. Then you can share his fate. Carl's hand moved toward his gun. The click of a rifle being cocked froze everyone. Sheriff Morrison sat his horse at the edge of the group, his Winchester trained on Carl. That's enough, the sheriff said. Everyone calm down. Sheriff, we're just... I know what you're doing, Carl, and it stops now. Morrison's voice carried the authority of years wearing a badge. Any man who draws a weapon will answer to me. You're taking their side, someone demanded. I'm taking the side of law and order. Cade's broken no laws. Neither is Mrs. Whitmore. That makes this attempted lynching, boys, and I won't stand for it in my town. Your town? Carl's face was red with anger and drink. This is our town, built by decent people, for decent people. Built on Apache land by folks looking for a second chance, Morrison corrected. Including your father, Carl, who came here to escape debts in Missouri? Or have you forgotten that? An uneasy murmur ran through the group. Morrison pressed on. Half the people in this town came here running from something. Who are we to deny another man the same chance? He's a killer. He was protecting his sister. Any man here would have done the same. Morrison's gaze swept the group. Now, I'm giving you all one chance to ride away. Take it. For a moment, the standoff held. Then, one by one, men began turning their horses. Carl was the last to go. His face twisted with fury. This isn't over, he said. You can't protect them forever, Sheriff. I can protect them as long as they're law-abiding citizens, which is more than I can say for a mob threatening violence. Morrison's rifle never wavered. Get going, Carl, and sober up before I see you again. Carl spat in the dust, but finally turned his horse. The mob retreated, leaving dust and tension in their wake. Morrison dismounted and approached the porch. You two all right? Yes, Clara said, though her knees felt weak. Thank you, Sheriff. Don't thank me yet. Carl's right about one thing. I can't be everywhere. He looked at Jessie. You carrying? Jessie nodded. Good. Keep it handy. And maybe think about finding somewhere else for a few days. Both of you. Let tempers cool. I won't be driven from my home, Clara said stubbornly. Pride's a cold comfort if you're dead. Clara. Morrison's expression softened. I'm not saying run. I'm saying be smart. The Carson Ranch is fortified and has plenty of hands. Stay there a few days. Let me work on calming things down. Jessie touched Clara's elbow. He's right. Clara wanted to argue, but saw the wisdom in the sheriff's words. A few days, that's all. That's all I'm asking, Morrison assured her. I'll have some words with the town council, and with Reverend Thompson. Remind them that Christian charity is supposed to mean something. After the sheriff left, Clara packed a small bag while Jessie kept watch. The sun was setting by the time they were ready to leave, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Wait, Clara said as Jessie helped her into the buggy. She went back inside and returned with a small wooden box. What's that? My poems. The ones I wrote before Thomas made me stop. She clutched the box tightly. If we're starting new, I want to bring the parts of my old self worth saving. Jessie's expression softened. We'll be back, Clara. This is your home. No. She looked at her little house, then at him. Home is where you are now. The rest is just wood and walls. They drove away as darkness fell. Clara's buggy following Jessie's horse. Behind them, Mercy's Bend glowed with lamplight. A town divided by prejudice and fear. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. As they rode, Clara thought about the line she'd crossed, the bridge she'd burned. Society would condemn her now, the widow who chose a killer over respectability. But sitting beside Jessie under the vast canvas of stars, she felt more free than she had in years. Let them condemn. She'd found something worth condemnation, a love that didn't apologize for existing, that didn't bow to convention or fear. And whatever came next, she'd face it with her eyes open and her choice made. The Carson Ranch appeared in the distance, lights beckoning like sanctuary. Clara reached over and took Jessie's free hand, their fingers intertwining. No regrets? He asked. None, she said, and meant it. Whatever happens now, we face it together. Together, he agreed, and in that simple word was a promise worth more than all the respectability in the world. The Carson Ranch sprawled across the desert like a small town unto itself, with its main house, bunkhouse, barns, and various outbuildings forming a protective circle against the wilderness. Mrs. Carson, a stout woman with kind eyes and calloused hands, welcomed Clara without judgment, installing her in a clean, spare room that looked out over the horse corrals. You'll be safe here, Mrs. Carson said, setting fresh linens on the bed. My Robert doesn't tolerate foolishness on his land, and the hands are loyal. They won't let anyone cause trouble. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. The events of the day seemed like a terrible dream, except for the very real fact that she was here, displaced from her own home by hatred and fear. Thank you for your kindness, she said. I know this must be an imposition. Nonsense. Mrs. Carson's voice was brisk. Jesse Cade's a good worker and a decent man. What this town's doing to you both is shameful. Now, you rest. Supper's at 6. After Mrs. Carson left, Clara lay back on the unfamiliar bed and stared at the ceiling. Through the window, she could hear the sounds of ranch life, horses nickering, men calling to each other, the clang of the dinner bell, normal sounds of people going about their lives, while hers had been torn apart. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Jessie stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking as uncertain as she'd ever seen him. May I come in? Of course. She sat up, smoothing her skirts. Though I suppose we're past worrying about propriety now. He entered but left the door open, maintaining some vestige of decorum. How are you? Honestly, I don't know. She managed a weak smile. This morning I was a school teacher. Tonight I'm... What? A fallen woman seeking sanctuary. Jessie crossed to her in 2 strides, kneeling beside the bed to take her hands. You're the bravest woman I know. That's what you are. I don't feel brave. I feel... She searched for words. Adrift. Like I've cut my anchor line and now I'm at the mercy of the current. I know that feeling. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. Felt it myself after Emily died. Like nothing was solid anymore. Like the ground itself might give way. What did you do? Survived. 1 day at a time. Found work. Kept moving. He looked up at her. Never found a reason to stop running until now. Clara freed one hand to touch his face, feeling the roughness of stubble, the warmth of skin. I'm glad you stopped. Even now? Even after everything it's cost you? Especially now. She leaned down to kiss him softly, though I reserve the right to have moments of doubt and self-pity. That drew a small smile from him. Fair enough. The dinner bell rang, and Jessie stood. You should eat, Mrs. Carson sets a good table. Will you be there? I take meals with the hands in the bunkhouse. It's better that way. Less talk. Clara felt a flash of anger, even here, in this sanctuary. The divisions remained, but she understood the practicality of it. After dinner, then, we could walk? I'd like that. Dinner was a quiet affair, Mr. Carson spoke little, focused on his meal, while his wife kept up a stream of gentle conversation about inconsequential things. Clara appreciated the effort to maintain normalcy, even as she pushed food around her plate with little appetite. Afterward, she found Jessie by the corrals, watching the horses in the fading light. Without speaking, they began to walk, following a path that led away from the buildings toward a small rise crowned with twisted juniper trees. I've been thinking, Clara said as they climbed, about Thomas, about our marriage. Jessie remained silent, letting her find her words. I told you he drank, that he was mean, but I never told you the worst of it. She paused, gathering courage. The night he died, it wasn't entirely an accident. Jessie's steps slowed, but he didn't speak. He came home drunk, worse than usual, angry about something, money, probably, or some imagined slight at the saloon. He grabbed me, shook me, said things. She wrapped her arms around herself. I fought back, pushed him. He fell, hit his head on the stove. For a moment, I thought I'd killed him. Clara. He got up, cursing, and stormed out to the barn, said he'd show me who was master, that he'd break that damned horse and then he'd break me. Her voice was steady, clinical almost. I didn't follow, didn't try to stop him. I sat in my kitchen and listened to him saddle that stallion everyone warned him about. Heard him ride out. I could have called for help. Could have sent someone after him. You were protecting yourself. Was I? Or was I hoping that horse would do what I couldn't? The question hung between them like a blade. When they brought his body back, I cried. But Jessie, I was crying from relief. Relief that I was free, that I'd never have to fear his footsteps again. What kind of woman does that make me? Jessie stopped walking and turned her to face him. In the dying light, his gray eyes were almost silver. It makes you human. It makes you a survivor. Just like me. You killed to protect your sister. I let my husband die to protect myself. We're quite a pair, aren't we? We are, he agreed simply. Both carrying guilt for things that weren't our fault. Emily dying because I wasn't there. Thomas dying because he was a violent drunk. Neither of us are murderers. Clara, we're just people who got caught in bad situations. The town wouldn't see it that way if they knew. The town sees what it wants to see, always has. He cupped her face gently. But I see you, the real you, and you're not guilty of anything except wanting to live free of fear. Clara felt tears threaten. How can you be so certain? Because I know what real guilt feels like. It's what I felt when I found Emily. When I held her broken body and knew I'd failed her. That's guilt. What you feel about Thomas, that's just the weight of a secret you never should have had to carry. They reached the top of the rise, where a fallen log made a natural bench. The ranch spread below them, lights beginning to twinkle in windows. Beyond, the desert stretched endlessly, painted in shades of purple and gold by the setting sun. "I've never told anyone," Clara said, settling beside him. "Not even Reverend Thompson when he counseled me through my grief. Your secret's safe with me. I know." She leaned against his shoulder. "Just as yours is with me. Maybe that's what we are to each other, safe harbors for each other's truths." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. After a while, Jessie spoke. "I've been thinking too, about the future, about what I can offer you." Clara tensed slightly. "Jessie, hear me out. I've saved most of my wages since I started at Carson's. It's not much, but it's enough to start fresh somewhere. California, maybe. Or Oregon. Somewhere nobody knows either of us. You want to run? I want you to have choices. A chance at a real life. Not just survival." He took her hand. "I know I'm not much of a catch. An ex-convict ranch hand with more scars than prospects. But I swear to you, Clara, I'd spend every day trying to make you happy. I'd work my fingers to the bone to give you a good life." Clara turned to study his face in the gathering darkness. "And what about what makes you happy?" He seemed surprised by the question. "You make me happy. Having someone to care for, to protect, to build something with. That's all I want. That's not enough. You deserve dreams of your own. Jessie, what did you want before everything went wrong?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, I wanted land. Just a small piece, with water and good grass. Wanted to raise horses, not just break them for other men, but breed them, train them proper. Emily used to say I had a gift with them." His voice roughened at his sister's name. "Foolish dream for a sharecropper's son." "It's not foolish. It's beautiful." Clara squeezed his hand. "And it's possible. We could do that. Find some land. Start a horse ranch. I have money saved. Enough for a down payment. You have the knowledge and skill." "Clara, I couldn't take your money. Our money. If we're doing this, Jessie, we're doing it as partners. Equal partners." She smiled in the darkness. "Besides, what use is a nest egg if you never hatch anything from it? You'd do that? Leave everything you know for an uncertain future with me?" "I've already left everything. My home, my position, my reputation, all gone. But sitting here with you, I don't feel like I've lost anything. I feel like I've finally found what I was looking for all along." Jessie pulled her close, and she felt him tremble slightly. "I love you. Clara Whitmore. Lord help me. I shouldn't. But I do. I love you too. Jessie Cade. Lord help us both." They kissed then, deep and desperate, as if trying to merge not just their bodies but their damaged souls. When they parted, both were breathing hard. "We should get back," Jessie said roughly, "before someone comes looking." They walked back slowly, hands linked, planning in whispers. California seemed best, far enough for a fresh start. With good horse country in the northern valleys, they'd leave as soon as Clara could settle her affairs, sell her house if possible, or simply abandon it if necessary. At the ranch, they parted reluctantly. Jessie headed to the bunkhouse while Clara returned to her borrowed room, but sleep eluded her. She lay awake thinking of all they'd shared, the truths finally spoken, the plans beginning to form. Near midnight, she gave up on sleep and wrapped herself in a shawl to sit by the window. The ranch was quiet, but she could see a light still burning in the bunkhouse. Was Jessie awake too, thinking of their future? A movement in the darkness caught her eye. A lone rider, approaching the ranch slowly, keeping to the shadows. Clara's heart began to race. Who would come here at this hour? And why so stealthily? The rider stopped near the main barn. Dismounting carefully, in the moonlight, Clara caught a glimpse of his face and gasped. Carl Patterson. He was carrying something, a torch, unlit but ready. Clara flew from her room, not stopping to think. She burst into the courtyard just as Carl was striking a match. "Stop!" she shouted. Carl whirled, the match falling from his fingers. "You!" he snarled. "Should have minded your own business. Schoolmarm. This is insane. Carl, you'll hang for arson. Only if they catch me. House fires happen. Tragic accidents. His words slurred with drink and malice. Maybe you should have stayed where you belong instead of spreading your legs for a killer. The crude words hit like a slap. But Clara stood her ground. And where do I belong? Carl? Under the thumb of another drunk like Thomas? Is that what you think women are for? You sharp-tongued witch! The click of a hammer being cocked cut him off. Jesse stood 10 feet away, his Colt trained on Carl's chest. Drop the torch, Jesse said calmly. Then get on your horse and ride away. Carl's face twisted. Should have known you'd come running. Can't keep away from her, can you? Drop it, or I drop you. For a moment, Clara thought Carl would comply. Then his hand went for his gun. The night exploded in gunfire. Clara screamed. When the smoke cleared, Carl was on the ground, clutching his shoulder, his gun in the dirt beside him. Men poured from the bunkhouse. Weapons drawn. Mister. Carson appeared in his nightshirt, rifle in hand. What in blazes? Carl Patterson tried to burn your barn, Clara said, her voice surprisingly steady. Jesse stopped him. Carson surveyed the scene, the torch, the wounded man, the dropped gun. Someone ride for the sheriff and the doctor. Rest of you, keep watch in case he didn't come alone. As men scrambled to follow orders, Jesse moved to Clara's side. You shouldn't have come out here. He could have hurt you. I couldn't let him destroy everything. She was shaking now, adrenaline fading. Oh, Jesse, what have we done? What we had to... He holstered his weapon and pulled her close. It's over now. But Clara knew better. It wasn't over. Carl Patterson bleeding in the dirt. Shot by Jesse Cade while attempting to burn Carson's property. This would inflame the town even more. They'd have to leave now. Tonight if possible. As if reading her thoughts. Carson approached them. You two need to be gone by dawn. I'll stand by what happened here. Tell the truth of it. But feelings are running too high. Take what you need. Horses, supplies. I'll settle with your wages. Cade, plus extra for the trouble. Mr. Carson, Jesse began. No arguments. You're a good hand and you did right tonight, but this town's got poison in its veins right now. Won't be safe for either of you. He looked at Clara. Ma'am, I'm sorry for all of this. You deserved better from Mercy's Bend. Within an hour, Sheriff Morrison had arrived and taken statements. Carl, bandaged and sullen, was loaded into a wagon for transport to jail. The sheriff pulled Jesse and Clara aside. Self-defense, clear as day, he said. But Carson's right. You need to leave. Tonight, preferably. We're already packing, Clara assured him. Morrison studied them in the lantern light. For what it's worth, I think you two might actually make it. Seen plenty of couples start with less and build something good. Thank you, Sheriff, for everything. He touched his hat. You folks take care of each other. As dawn approached, Clara and Jesse prepared to leave. Clara had little to pack, just her small bag and her box of poems. Jesse had even less. Carson provided them with 2 good horses and a pack mule loaded with supplies. Misses. Carson pressed a cloth-wrapped bundle into Clara's hands. Food for the road. And this, she added a small leather pouch. Wedding gift, when you get around to it. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. Be happy. That's thanks enough. They rode out as the first light touched the eastern sky, turning back once to see the ranch spread out behind them. Then they faced forward, toward the unknown territory ahead. Regrets? Jesse asked as they passed the boundary of Carson land. Clara thought of her little house, now abandoned. Her schoolroom with its empty desks, the life she'd built so carefully, now in ruins. Then she looked at the man beside her, scarred and steady, offering her not safety but partnership, not comfort but love. No, she said, meaning it. No regrets. They rode on into the rising sun, 2 damaged souls seeking redemption in each other's company. Behind them, Mercy's Bend would wake to scandal and gossip. Ahead lay California and the chance to build something new from the ashes of their pasts. It wouldn't be easy. Love born from such dark soil rarely was, but as Jessie reached over to take her hand, Clara knew with bone-deep certainty that it would be worth it. They'd found something worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth risking everything to protect. And in the harsh landscape of the frontier, where survival itself was an act of defiance, that was no small thing. It was, perhaps, everything. They had been riding for 3 days when the dust cloud appeared on the horizon behind them. Jessie spotted it first, his body tensing in the saddle. Clara followed his gaze, her heart sinking as she made out the dark smudge against the afternoon sky. "Riders," Jessie said quietly. "Moving fast. How many? Can't tell yet, but more than 2. He scanned the terrain ahead. "There's a box canyon about 2 miles west. We could hole up there, see who it is. And if it's trouble, then at least we'll have cover." He touched her arm. "Can you push harder?" Clara nodded, though her body already ached from days in the saddle. They spurred their horses to a gallop, the pack mule protesting but keeping pace. The canyon Jessie had mentioned was narrow, with high walls and scattered boulders providing decent cover. They dismounted quickly, Jessie positioning the horses behind the largest rocks. "Stay down," he told Clara, checking his rifle. "If shooting starts, you take the horses and ride out the back. Don't stop, don't look back. I'm not leaving you." "Clara." "No." She pulled the small derringer from her travel bag, a gift from Mrs. Carson she hadn't mentioned to Jessie. "We stand together or not at all." Before he could argue, the sound of approaching horses echoed off the canyon walls. Jessie moved to a position where he could see the entrance. Clara crouched beside him. The riders appeared. 5 men, led by someone Clara recognized with a chill. Frank Patterson, Carl's older brother, wearing a deputy's badge that hadn't been there when they left Mercy's Bend. "Cade!" Frank's voice boomed in the confined space. "Jessie Cade, I know you're in there. Come out peaceful-like." Jessie remained silent, watching. "Got paper on you. Cade, legal warrant for attempted murder. Carl's fighting for his life, and Judge Carter wants you brought back for trial." Clara felt rage kindle in her chest. "A warrant? After Carl had tried to burn down the Carson barn? You've got 1 minute to show yourself." Frank continued. "After that, we come in shooting." Jessie looked at Clara, his face grim. Then he called out, "I've got a witness says it was self-defense. Patterson. Your brother drew first. Court can sort that out. You coming peaceful or not?" Clara knew what Jessie was thinking. A trial in Mercy's Bend would be a lynching with legal trappings. But running would make them outlaws for real, forever looking over their shoulders. "I'll come," Jessie called, starting to rise. Clara grabbed his arm. "No." "It's the only way. It's suicide." She raised her voice. "Frank Patterson, this is Clara Whitmore. Your brother came to burn down Mr. Carson's property. He drew on Jessie when caught. Sheriff Morrison took statements from multiple witnesses. Any warrant issued after that is false, and you know it." Silence greeted this. Then Frank's voice, harder now. "You're harboring a fugitive. Clara, that makes you guilty too. Both of you come out, or we're coming in." Jessie and Clara exchanged glances. 5 armed men, probably picked for their grudge against Jessie rather than any legal authority. The odds were bad and getting worse. Then, unexpectedly, another voice rang out. "That's far enough, Patterson." Clara's heart leaped. Sheriff Morrison appeared at the canyon mouth, backed by 3 men including Mr. Carson himself. The sheriff's rifle was trained on Frank's back. "Sheriff," Frank said without turning, "we're serving a legal warrant." "Funny thing about that warrant," Morrison said conversationally. "Judge Carter says he never issued one. Seems someone's been playing with his seal. That's a federal offense." "Frank, you're lying." "Am I?" "Turn around slow. Drop your guns." For a tense moment, Clara thought Frank would try to fight. Then, slowly, he and his men complied. Morrison's deputies efficiently disarmed them. "Jessie, Clara, you can come out," Morrison called. "It's safe." They emerged cautiously. Clara had never been so glad to see anyone as she was to see the sheriff's weathered face. "How did you know?" Jessie asked. Mrs. Carson overheard Frank recruiting men, talking about a warrant nobody'd seen. We rode hard to catch up. Morrison looked at the sullen group of would-be vigilantes. These boys are going to jail. Real jail, with real charges. Carl? Clara had to ask. Is he really dying? Morrison snorted. Flesh wound. He's already up and whining about it. But that didn't stop Frank here from trying to use it as an excuse. As Morrison's men led the vigilantes away, Mr. Carson approached. You two need to keep moving. This won't be the last group to come after you, legal or not. We know, Jesse said. And thank you for everything. Carson shook Jesse's hand. You earned it, both of you. Now get, before someone else gets stupid ideas. They remounted, but Morrison held up a hand. One more thing. There's a town called Haven, about a week's ride northwest. Sheriff there is an old friend, Sam Briggs. Tell him I sent you. He'll see you're treated fair. Thank you, Sheriff. Clara said, I won't forget this. Don't thank me. Just live well. That'll be thanks enough. They rode out again, but the encounter had shaken them both. That night, camped by a small spring, they sat close to the fire, taking comfort in each other's presence. It won't stop, Jesse said quietly. Men like the Pattersons, they don't forgive. We'll be looking over our shoulders forever. Maybe we'll get far enough away that they'll find other things to hate. Clara stared into the flames. Either way, I'd rather face it with you than live safe and alone. You sure? It's not too late. You could go back. Say I forced you. Clara silenced him with a kiss. Stop trying to save me from my own choices. I'm exactly where I want to be. They made love that night under the stars, their bodies finding comfort and connection that words couldn't provide. Clara had never known such tenderness could exist alongside such passion. With Thomas, coupling had been a duty, often painful, always brief. With Jesse, it was a conversation without words, a sharing of souls as much as bodies. Afterward, they lay entwined, a blanket pulled over their nakedness. Jesse traced patterns on her bare shoulder, his touch feather-light. Tell me about Haven, Clara said. Do you think we could really start over there? Maybe. Morrison wouldn't have sent us there without reason. He pressed a kiss to her hair. We'll need new names, though new story. Mr. and Mrs. Clara considered. Hawthorne? I always loved that name. Jesse Hawthorne. He tested it. Could work. What's our story? Newlyweds from back east, looking to start a horse ranch, which is true enough, except for the married part. We could fix that in Haven, make it official. Clara's heart skipped. Is that a proposal? Mr. Cade? It's a promise, Miss Whitmore. His arms tightened around her. If you'll have me. I've already had you, she teased, then grew serious. Yes, Jesse. Yes to all of it. They reached Haven 6 days later, trail-worn and weary but alive. The town was larger than Mercy's Bend, with a sense of established order that promised anonymity. Sheriff Briggs, a barrel-chested man with shrewd eyes, received them with Morrison's letter of introduction. Sam Morrison's word is good enough for me, he said after reading. You folks looking to settle or passing through? Settle if there's opportunity. Jesse replied, I'm good with horses, and my wife teaches school. The word wife sent a thrill through Clara, even though it wasn't true yet. Well, we could use both. Lost our school teacher last month to childbirth. And Tom Wheeler's been looking for help at his horse farm. Briggs studied them. I won't ask what you're running from. Morrison says you're good people. That's enough. But I'll tell you straight. Cause trouble in my town. And you'll answer for it. We're not looking for trouble, Sheriff, Clara assured him. Just a fresh start. Then welcome to Haven. They found lodging at a respectable boarding house, registering as Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne. The lie sat strangely on Clara's tongue, but Jesse's steady presence beside her made it feel like a promise rather than a deception. The next morning, Jesse went to see about the job at Wheeler's horse farm, while Clara inquired about the teaching position. the school board chairman. A Mr. Garrett was encouraging. "We're desperate, frankly," he admitted. "The children have been without proper instruction for weeks. Can you start Monday?" "Of course." Clara hesitated, then asked, "Will it be a problem that I'm married? Some towns prefer unmarried teachers." Garrett waved dismissively. "This is Haven, Mrs. Hawthorne. We're more concerned with capability than convention. Besides, a married woman is considered more stable, less likely to run off." If only he knew, Clara thought wryly. That evening, she and Jesse met at a small restaurant to share their news. He'd been hired at Wheeler's, with the possibility of eventually running his own breeding program. "Tom's a good man," Jesse said. "Fair. And his operation is solid. I could learn a lot." "Then we're really doing this? Starting over?" "Looks like." He reached across the table to take her hand. "But first, we need to make one thing official." They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the Haven courthouse. Sheriff Briggs served as witness, along with his wife, a motherly woman who insisted on providing Clara with a borrowed veil and bouquet, standing before the justice of the peace. Clara felt none of the dread that had accompanied her first wedding. Then, she'd been a young girl bullied into marriage with a man she barely knew. Now, she was a woman choosing her own path, binding herself to someone who'd already proven his worth through trial and sacrifice. "I, Jesse Hawthorne, take you, Clara, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Jesse said, his gray eyes never leaving hers. The false surname didn't matter. The promise behind it was real. "I, Clara Hawthorne, take you, Jesse, to be my lawfully wedded husband," she replied, her voice strong and clear. When the justice pronounced them married and Jesse kissed her, Clara felt something settle in her chest. A rightness, a completion. They'd been forged in scandal and tested by fire, but they'd emerged stronger for it. That night, in their room at the boarding house, they came together as husband and wife. It was different somehow, not more passionate than before, but deeper, sealed with the legitimacy they'd craved. "No regrets?" Jesse asked afterward, echoing his question from the trail. "Only one," Clara admitted. "I wish Emily could have met you like this, happy, free, with a future ahead." Jesse's eyes misted. "She would have loved you, would have been glad to see me settled with someone strong enough to keep me in line." "Is that what I do, keep you in line?" "Among other things." He pulled her close. "You make me want to be better than I am. To build something worth having, we'll build it together." Clara promised. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Outside their window, Haven slept peacefully, unaware of the new residents' past. But past didn't matter here. Clara realized, only future. The future they'd claimed with blood and courage and a love that refused to apologize for existing. They'd traveled far from Mercy's Bend, leaving behind everything familiar. But lying in Jesse's arms, Clara knew she'd finally come home. Not to a place, but to a person. One who'd seen her at her lowest and lifted her higher than she'd ever dreamed possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. They'd have to learn to be the Hawthornes, to build the life they'd imagined on the trail. But tonight, they were simply Jesse and Clara, two souls who'd found each other against all odds. And that, Clara thought as sleep claimed her, was miracle enough for anyone. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after they'd settled in Haven. Clara was preparing lessons in their small rented house when Jesse came in from the horse farm, his face grave. "What is it?" she asked, seeing the envelope in his hand. "Sheriff Briggs gave me this. Said it came through official channels, marked urgent." He handed it to her. "It's addressed to Clara Whitmore." Clara's hands trembled as she opened it. The letterhead was from a law firm in Fort Summer. As she read, the blood drained from her face. "Thomas's brother," she whispered. "He's contesting the will, says I contributed to Thomas's death through neglect. He's demanding an inquest." Jesse took the letter, scanning it quickly. "This is dated 6 weeks ago. Why is it only reaching us now?" "Because they sent it to Mercy's Bend first." Clara sank into a chair. Jessie, if there's an inquest, if they start investigating, they'll find out the truth. He knelt beside her chair. Clara, we knew this might happen. The question is, what do we do about it? Clara's mind raced. Marcus Whitmore had never liked her, had opposed the marriage from the start. But he'd been in California when Thomas died, had seemed content to let her have the small inheritance. Why now? The Pattersons, she said suddenly. They must have contacted him, told him about us. This is their revenge. Jessie's jaw tightened. Using the law to do what their guns couldn't. If I don't respond, they'll issue a warrant. If I do respond. She couldn't finish. Either way, their carefully constructed new life would crumble. We run, Jessie said. Tonight, head for California like we originally planned. No. Clara straightened in her chair. No more running. I won't live my whole life looking over my shoulder. Clara, be practical. If you go back, if there's a trial, then I'll tell the truth. The words came out stronger than she felt. All of it. About Thomas's drinking, his violence. That night, let them judge me for surviving. Jessie studied her face. You're serious. I'm tired of lies. Jessie, even necessary ones. We changed our names, our story, but the past is still there. Waiting. She took his hands. Maybe it's time to face it. Together? Always together. They spent the rest of the day making preparations. Clara wrote to the school board, explaining she had urgent family business requiring her absence. Jessie arranged leave from Wheeler's farm. Sheriff Briggs, when informed of their situation, offered pragmatic advice. Get yourself a good lawyer, he said. Don't go back there defenseless, and wire me if you need character witnesses. The Hawthorns have been nothing but upstanding citizens here. The journey back to New Mexico felt surreal. Every mile brought them closer to the world they'd fled, the people who'd driven them out. Clara alternated between determination and dread, drawing strength from Jessie's steady presence beside her. They stopped in Fort Summer to consult with James Morrison, the lawyer Sheriff Morrison had recommended. A thin, serious man with intelligent eyes. He listened to Clara's full story without judgment. The law's murky here, he admitted. Failing to prevent someone from taking a dangerous action isn't typically criminal, but in a hostile jurisdiction, with a judge inclined against you. What are my options? Clara asked. We petition for a change of venue. Get the inquest moved to Fort Summer, where you might get a fairer hearing. Meanwhile, I'll depose witnesses from Mercy's Bend who can testify to Thomas's character. Will anyone speak for me? Morrison smiled slightly. You might be surprised. Sheriff Morrison has already agreed to testify, and I received a curious message from a Mrs. Dolores Vasquez, offering to share what she knows about your marriage. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Even in that hostile place, there had been those who saw, who understood. They took rooms at a Fort Summer hotel, Jessie registering under his real name for the first time in months. That night, unable to sleep. Clara stood at the window watching the dark street below. Scared? Jessie asked, coming up behind her. Terrified, she admitted. But also relieved, like a tooth that's been aching finally being pulled. We can still leave. Tonight. I'll take you anywhere you want to go. Clara turned in his arms. I know. That's why I can stay. Because I'm choosing to, not because I have to. The preliminary hearing was set for the following week. Morrison worked tirelessly, gathering affidavits and evidence. To Clara's surprise, Dr. Hartley from Mercy's Bend agreed to provide medical records documenting injuries consistent with spousal abuse. Even Mrs. Mills from the general store sent a statement about the black eye she'd witnessed. But the most unexpected support came from Margaret Whitmore, Thomas's own sister. She arrived the day before the hearing, a small woman with tired eyes who looked older than her 30 years. Clara had met her only once, at her wedding to Thomas. I should have spoken up years ago, Margaret said, sitting in Morrison's office. I knew what my brother was, saw what he did to our mother before she died, but family loyalty... She shook her head. Marcus is doing this for the money. Mrs. Whitmore. Thomas owed him gambling debts. He thinks if he can prove you're unfit, he can claim the estate. Will you testify? Morrison asked. Margaret met Clara's eyes. Yes, it's time someone told the truth about my brother. All of it. The hearing was held in the Fort Summer Courthouse. Judge Theodore Banks presiding. Clara had feared a circus, but Morrison had managed to keep it relatively private. Still, Marcus Whitmore's presence in the plaintiff's seat made her stomach churn. He looked so much like Thomas, the same heavy features, the same cold eyes. Marcus's lawyer, a pompous man named Fitzgerald, presented his case first. Clara Whitmore, he argued, had been a negligent wife who had allowed her husband to ride a dangerous horse while intoxicated, making no effort to stop him. She sat in her kitchen, Fitzgerald intoned dramatically, while her husband went to his death. What kind of wife does nothing while her spouse faces mortal danger? Morrison's defense was methodical and devastating. He presented the medical records, the witness statements, painting a picture of a marriage that was far from the ideal Marcus claimed. Then Clara took the stand. Tell us about the night your husband died, Morrison prompted gently. Clara looked at Jesse in the gallery, drawing strength from his presence. Then she began to speak. She told them about Thomas coming home drunk and violent, about the threats, the shaking, her fear, about pushing him away and his fall against the stove. He said he would break that horse and then break me, she said quietly. I believed him. I'd believed him before when he made such threats. And you didn't follow him to the barn? No, I was afraid. Afraid if I tried to stop him, he'd turn on me again. Afraid if I called for help, he'd punish me later. She met the judge's eyes. I sat in my kitchen and prayed. I'm not proud of it, but I prayed that horse would throw him. God help me, I prayed for my own freedom. Mrs. Whitmore. Fitzgerald began his cross-examination. Are you admitting you wanted your husband dead? Morrison objected. But Clara answered anyway. I wanted to be safe. I wanted the fear to end. If that meant his death. She lifted her chin. Then yes, in that moment, I wanted him gone. Gasps rose from the sparse gallery, but Clara felt oddly calm. The truth, however ugly, was finally in the open. Margaret Whitmore's testimony followed, confirming Thomas's history of violence. Then Dr. Hartley detailed Clara's injuries over the years. Sheriff Morrison testified to Thomas's reputation as a mean drunk and Clara's character as a dedicated teacher. Finally, Jesse was called as a character witness for Clara's current life. He spoke simply but powerfully about her strength, her kindness, her determination to build something good from the ashes of her past. Clara Whitmore, Clara Hawthorne now, is the finest woman I know, he said. Whatever happened in her past, she's paid for it 10 times over. She deserves peace. Judge Banks retired to consider the evidence. The wait was agony. Clara sat between Jesse and Morrison, trying not to fidget. Marcus glared at her from across the aisle, his resemblance to Thomas making her skin crawl. When the judge returned, his expression was stern. This court has heard disturbing testimony about the marriage of Thomas and Clara Whitmore. While it's clear that Thomas Whitmore's death was tragic, it's equally clear that his wife lived in fear for her safety. He looked directly at Clara. Mrs. Whitmore, your admission that you hoped for your husband's death is troubling. However, hope is not action. You did not cause his death. His own drunken recklessness did. Moreover, given the documented abuse you suffered, your feelings were understandable, if not admirable. Clara held her breath. I find no evidence of criminal wrongdoing or negligence on Mrs. Whitmore's part. The petition for inquest is denied. The original will stands. Marcus erupted in curses, having to be restrained by bailiffs. Clara sat frozen, hardly believing it was over. Furthermore, Judge Banks continued, I strongly suggest Mr. Marcus Whitmore consider carefully before pursuing any further legal action in this matter. The evidence presented today could easily support charges against the late Thomas Whitmore. Were he alive to face them? It was over. Clara felt Jesse's arm around her, heard Morrison's congratulations. But it all seemed distant, unreal. She'd confessed her darkest secret in open court and survived. Outside the courthouse, Margaret Whitmore approached them. "I'm sorry," she said simply, "for my brother, for my family, for staying silent so long. We all do what we must to survive." Clara replied, understanding too well the weight of family secrets. Marcus had disappeared, presumably to nurse his wounds and rage elsewhere. Morrison warned he might try again, but Clara doubted it. The truth had been too damaging, too public. That evening, in their hotel room, Clara and Jessie held each other close. The weight that had pressed on Clara's chest for years was finally gone. "You were so brave," Jessie murmured against her hair. "Standing up there, telling everything." "I was terrified," Clara admitted. "But you were right there. I could see you, and I knew I could do it. Always," he promised. "Oh, I'll always be there." They made love slowly, tenderly, a reaffirmation of the bond that had carried them through so much. Later, as they lay entwined, Clara felt a peace she hadn't known was possible. "What now?" she asked. "Back to Haven? Back to being the Hawthorns?" Jessie considered. "What do you want? We could go anywhere now. California, Oregon, even back east if you wanted." "I like Haven," Clara said after a moment. "I like my school, your work with the horses. I like who we are there. The Hawthorns, then." "Why not? Clara and Jessie Hawthorne, respectable citizens with a slightly mysterious past." She smiled. "It's almost true now. The worst is behind us." They returned to Haven to find their positions waiting and their neighbors welcoming. If anyone wondered about their sudden departure and return, they kept it to themselves. Haven, true to its name, asked few questions of those seeking sanctuary. 6 months later, as Clara stood before her class explaining long division and remembering Timothy Morrison's breakthrough with fondness, she felt the first flutter of life in her belly. That evening, she told Jessie, watching his face transform with wonder and joy. A baby. He breathed, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy? Happy?" He kissed her deeply. "Clara, you've given me everything. Love, a home, a future. And now this? I don't have words for what I feel." Clara thought of the journey that had brought them here, from that first meeting by her broken wagon to this moment of new life beginning. So much pain, so much struggle, but it had led them to each other. "I love you, Jessie Hawthorne," she said. "And I love you, Clara Hawthorne, forever and always." Outside, Haven went about its evening routines, unaware of the small miracle unfolding in the Hawthorne house. But Clara didn't need the world to know. She had Jessie. She had their child growing within her. She had a life built on truth rather than pretense. She'd been tested by fire and emerged not unscathed, but stronger. And in the arms of the man who'd walked through that fire with her, she'd found something worth every moment of pain. A love that didn't apologize for existing. A future that didn't bow to the past. It was, she thought, more than enough. It was everything. The seasons turned, and Clara's belly grew round with promise. Jessie had become even more protective, if such a thing were possible, fussing over her health and insisting she reduce her teaching hours. But Clara continued working, finding joy in her students' progress, even as her own body changed. It was a crisp autumn morning when the past intruded one final time. Clara was teaching arithmetic when she glanced out the window and saw him, Marcus Whitmore, sitting atop a black horse at the edge of the schoolyard, just watching. Her blood chilled, but she kept her voice steady as she assigned work to the children. Stepping outside, she faced her former brother-in-law, one hand protectively over her swollen stomach. "Marcus, you're far from home." "Heard you spawned," he said, his voice thick with the same meanness that had lived in Thomas. "Thought I'd see for myself what kind of bastard my brother's killer is carrying. You need to leave, now. Public property, this road." His eyes traveled over her form with disgust. "Look at you, playing the respectable wife and mother, but I know what you are, what you did. The court, The court was fooled by your tears and lies, but I know the truth. You killed him sure as if you'd put a bullet in him." Clara felt the old fear trying to rise, but pushed it down. She wasn't that frightened woman anymore. "What do you want? Marcus?" "Justice. But since the law won't give it, I'll settle for watching you suffer, knowing that every happiness you steal was built on my brother's grave. Your brother built his own grave with whiskey and rage. I just declined to jump in with him." Clara's voice was steady now. "And I'm done suffering for Thomas's sins. Or yours." Movement caught her eye. Jesse emerged from Wheeler's farm. Having spotted Marcus, he walked with deadly purpose, and Marcus's hand drifted to his gun. "Jesse, no!" Clara called. "He's leaving." Jesse reached them, positioning himself between Clara and Marcus. "You heard my wife. Time to go." "Your wife." Marcus spat. "A killer's whore, carrying a killer's whelp." Jesse's hand moved to his gun, but Clara touched his arm. "He's not worth it. He's nothing, just a bitter man clinging to hate because it's all he has left." Marcus's face purpled. "You sanctimonious Mr. Whitmore." Sheriff Briggs appeared, having been alerted by one of Clara's students. "I believe you're lost. The road out of town is that way." "Sheriff?" Marcus's smile was ugly. "Just paying respects to my sister-in-law. Former sister-in-law. And your respects aren't welcome. Move along now, or we'll discuss disturbing the peace." For a moment, Marcus looked ready to challenge them all. Then his shoulders sagged. Clara saw him clearly then. A small, bitter man who'd traveled hundreds of miles to feed on hate because he had nothing else. "This isn't over," he said, but the threat sounded hollow. "Yes, it is," Clara said quietly. "It ended the day Thomas died. You just haven't accepted it yet." Marcus wheeled his horse and rode away. They watched until he was just dust on the horizon. Then Sheriff Briggs touched his hat. "Don't think he'll be back, but I'll keep watch. You folks all right?" "Fine, Sheriff, thank you," Jesse said, his arm around Clara. After Briggs left, Clara leaned into her husband's strength. Will it never end? Will we always be looking over our shoulders? No. Jesse's voice was firm. That was the last gasp of a dying past. "Look at us. Clara, look what we've built. He can't touch this." Clara looked at the school where she was beloved, at the town that had become home, at her husband who'd walked through fire for her, at the child growing within her. Jesse was right. They'd built something stronger than hate, more enduring than bitterness. That evening, as they sat by their fire, Clara felt the baby kick strongly. She guided Jesse's hand to the spot, watching his face light up with wonder. "Strong little one," he murmured, "like its mama. I hope it has your eyes." Clara said, "That storm cloud gray that sees everything. And your spirit, your courage. Our child will have both." Clara decided, "The best of us both." They were silent for a while, listening to the crackle of the fire, the distant sounds of Haven settling for the night. Then Clara spoke. "I've been thinking about Thomas, about forgiveness." Jesse tensed slightly. "What about it?" "I'll never forgive what he did to me. The fear, the pain, the bruises." She stared into the flames. "But I think I can forgive him for dying, for being too weak and too drunk to save himself. Does that make sense?" "It makes perfect sense. You're letting go of the guilt." "Yes, finally." She turned to face him. "And Marcus, I pity him. Imagine carrying that much hate, letting it eat you alive. Thomas is more alive in his bitterness than he ever was in our marriage. While you've chosen life." Jesse's hand rested on her belly. "New life, hope. We've chosen it together." As winter approached, they prepared for the baby's arrival. The women of Haven, led by Mrs. Briggs, organized a quilting bee that produced enough blankets for 3 babies. Jesse built a cradle with his own hands, carving tiny horses around the edges. Clara knitted and sewed, creating a layette with love in every stitch. The labor began on a cold December night. Snow was falling softly, blanketing Haven in pristine white. Jesse paced like a caged wolf while Dr. Patterson, no relation to the Mercy's Bend Pattersons, and Mrs. Briggs attended Clara. "First babies take their time." "Mrs." Briggs said soothingly. But Clara could see the concern in her eyes as the hours stretched on. The pain was beyond anything Clara had imagined. Waves that threatened to pull her under. But each time she felt herself weakening, she heard Jesse's voice through the door, telling her he loved her, that she was strong, that she could do this. "I want him here," she gasped between contractions. "I need him." "Doctor," Patterson looked scandalized. But Mrs. Briggs overruled him. "If it helps her, he comes in." Jesse was at her side instantly, his face pale but his hands steady as they gripped hers. "I'm here, love, I'm here. Don't leave," Clara panted. "Promise you won't leave." "Never, not for anything." The final stage was a blur of pain and effort, Jesse's voice anchoring her when everything else spun away. Then, suddenly, a new voice joined theirs, the indignant wail of their child. "A daughter." "Doctor," Patterson announced, cleaning the baby efficiently, small but healthy. Jessie was crying openly as the baby was placed in Clara's arms. She was perfect, tiny fists waving, face scrunched in newborn fury, a shock of dark hair like her father's. "Emily," Clara whispered. "Emily Hope Hawthorne." Jessie's tears came harder at his sister's name. "She's beautiful. You're beautiful. My brave, beautiful girls." As dawn broke over Haven, painting the snow-covered world in shades of rose and gold, Clara held her daughter and marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From a broken wagon on a dusty road to this moment of perfect completion. "Look what love built," she murmured to Jessie, who hadn't left their side. "Out of all that pain and darkness, look what love built." "A family," Jessie said softly. "A real family. The first of many miracles, I hope." "Greedy woman," he teased gently. "Isn't one miracle enough? With you? Never. I want it all. Children laughing in our yard, horses in our pasture, years of sunrises and sunsets together." She looked up at him. This man who'd given her courage to face her demons and strength to build anew. "I want forever." "Jessie Hawthorne, is that too much to ask?" "Not nearly enough," he said, kissing her softly. "I'll give you forever and then some." Outside their window, Haven woke to a world transformed by snow, clean and bright with possibility. Inside, 3 souls made a circle of love that no amount of hate or bitterness could break. Later, as Clara dozed with Emily at her breast and Jessie kept watch over them both, she thought she heard whispers on the wind, not the cruel gossip of Mercy's Bend, but the whispered promises of all the years to come. Years of growth and joy, challenge and triumph, always together, always strong. She'd walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but tempered, like steel made stronger by the forge. And in the end, that fire had led her home. Not to a place, but to a person. Not to safety, but to love that didn't apologize for existing. "I didn't know love could hurt so sweetly," she'd told Jessie that night so long ago, trembling in his arms as their love began. Now she knew the truth. Love could hurt. Yes, but it could also heal, could build, could transform 2 broken souls into something whole and beautiful. As sleep claimed her, Clara smiled. The girl who'd come west seeking adventure had found so much more. She'd found herself, her strength, her voice. She'd found Jessie, her anchor and her wings. And now she'd found Emily, their hope made flesh. The past was done, its ghosts finally laid to rest. The future stretched before them, bright with promise under the endless western sky. And in this moment, in this room filled with love and new life, Clara Whitmore Hawthorne was exactly where she belonged. Home at last, held in the arms of her chosen family, writing the next chapter of a story that was finally, truly her own. Through the window, a lone eagle circled in the crystal morning air, riding the wind toward distant mountains. Clara watched it soar and knew they too would rise, would fly, would find their way to heights undreamed. Together, always together, in this wild and beautiful land that had tested them and found them worthy of its greatest gift, the freedom to love without fear, to build without shame, to live without apology. It was enough. It was everything. It was home. Thank you for joining Clara and Jesse on their journey through the untamed American West. If you're listening to this story, we'd love to know where in the world you are. Leave a comment below and let's connect across the miles. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more tales of love, courage, and redemption in the frontier. Share your thoughts about Clara and Jesse's story. Did their love inspire you? What would you have done in their place? Your comments help us build a community of story lovers who believe in the power of love against all odds.